Lars Larson.
Welcome back to the Lars Larson Show. It's a pleasure to be with you, and I'm glad to get your phone calls and emails in a moment. We want to talk about a fairly important court decision that's just come down. And in the interest of full disclosure, I always try to do that. Do I own AR-15s and other semi-automatic rifles, now called by most liberal Democrats assault weapons? Yes, I do. In fact, I have cans of what is known as cream of coyote, which is .223 ammunition, and those came from Dan Mitchell. And Dan Mitchell is with Sporting Systems in Vancouver, founder of the Washington Civil Rights Association, and he's the guy I wanted to talk to when I saw the decision came down. A Thurston County Superior Court judge has upheld a 2023 state law that bans the sale, manufacture, distribution, and import of assault weapons, so-called, otherwise known as semi-automatic sporting rifles. Dan, welcome back to the program.
Good afternoon, Lars. Here again to discuss another terrible court decision.
It is, and I guess I don't, well, I'll ask you anyway. What do you suppose is going to happen to this one when it goes from Thurston County Superior Court to the Appeals Court, and then I assume it ultimately to the Washington State Supreme Court? Is this really legitimate under Washington State's Constitution to ban people from even buying a semi-automatic rifle?
No, but the law and the Constitution really don't apply to the court systems on the west side of the state. So this will go the same way that the Gators Gun Magazine challenge has gone. The state's going to determine that they're not used for lawful self-defense, so they're not protected. And I can say, I own numerous semi-auto rifles for self-defense, but I'm not actively shooting them every day. No more than I use my life insurance or my defibrillator or my tourniquets. I have them in the ready to be used, but I don't apply them daily. And the self-defense term that the state's attorney, Zach Peckerless, in his quote says, they're not used for self-defense. Well, self-defense has nothing to do with the SCOTUS's Heller decision, which said for traditional lawful purposes. The courts and the lawyers are injecting self-defense, and that's not part of the SCOTUS decision.
No, in fact, Dan, I know there's a hazard to pointing this out, but the founders of the country put the Second Amendment in there because they feared the rise of a tyrannical government. Do you think I'm right?
That's precisely why it's there. It's for any lawful purpose, one of which is resisting government, ours or others, that are trying to impugn their will on the American populace.
And in fact, the reason they wrote it in there was that those very people had just been under a tyrannical government and they threw it off. And then they said, hey, maybe we should make sure that the people of this future country, then 13 colonies and 13 states, might have to have need of that again.
Correct. And the states, the West Coast is just full of these precedents, and they'll tell you that the courts have held them up and all that stuff, and so they're completely lawful. But the fact is that the courts are on the West Coast primarily are kind of all in the bag. From a policy standpoint, they're not going to find gun bans unconstitutional. You go to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in particular, 50 of 50 gun cases submitted and found unconstitutional at the three-judge panel level have gone to the en banc panels, and 50 out of 50 have been overturned. Typically, the en banc panel overturns less than 1% of the three-judge panel decisions, but in this case, they're 100%. The Ninth Circuit Court is 100% overturning bans that were found to be unconstitutional. And that's a straight-up chilling effect on the people that are funding these cases, because it just adds more layers of court costs, appealing to the SCOTUS. And so, we're doing this with private money, where we have the state of Washington using their deep pockets and their private law firms, like this attorney Peckerless comes from Pacifica Law. They've got unlimited funds to continue pushing these things down the road, kicking the can down the road.
Well, but Dan, let me ask. I assume that the Thurston County judge made this decision under the state constitution, because the state constitution is worded a little strangely. The right of the individual citizen to bear arms in defense of himself or the state shall not be impaired. But does it suggest then a federal appeal? And is it possible to take this decision once it's run the route up to the appeals court and then the Washington Supreme Court? And I think you're right. They will predictably come back and say, of course it's all right to ban guns. And then is there a way to take that one to the U.S. Supreme Court and say this is not in keeping with Heller or any of the other most recent decisions? You've got to overturn it. Or is this strictly a state court decided case?
Well, so this has been determined under another gun case in McDonald versus the city of Chicago. And in that case, SCOTUS said, hey, the U.S. Constitution applies to state and local governments too. It's not just that the states...
Well, not only applies, but trumps, right? Doesn't it trump
Correct.
State? Yeah.
The supremacy clause, it's the number one thing, it's the law of the land. And so, yes, this can get petitioned up to the Supreme Court after it goes through the state court system. It gets through the state Supreme Court like Gators, and then it can get petitioned to the SCOTUS.
But in the meantime, it goes into effect. So at this point, you can't buy a semi-automatic rifle. Or is it only semi-automatic rifles that look a certain way, ones that scare Democrats?
Oh no, it's all kinds of semi-automatic rifles. It's things. It's rimfire 22s. It's threaded barrel pistols. It's shotguns that have semi-automatic shotguns that have a pistol brace on them, as opposed to a regular traditional drop comb stock. It's all kinds of things other than your traditional AR, AK, scary black gun things. So it's taken out about probably 50% of the available SKUs that we used to be able to sell to Washington citizens. We can't sell them anymore. So you've had a chilling effect on the revenue streams and the health of the gun industry in the state of Washington and elsewhere, because we can't sell these guns anymore. So our market has shrunk because you can't sell the product.
Well, and Dan, I would even make the argument that it leads to unequal treatment under the law, because I own some of these guns, you own some of these guns, but somebody comes along and says, well, if you own them and Dan owns them, can I own them too? And they say, no, the state of Washington says I can own them till the end of my life, but you can't own them at all. And to me, I would think that an equal protection argument would be there to say, well, hold on. Why do some citizens in the state get superior rights when it comes to firearms to other citizens in the state? Does that make sense? And is that equal treatment under the law? I would argue it's not.
It absolutely is not. And I have to point this out to law enforcement agents that move to the state of Washington with their own personally owned firearms. I had an ATF agent that moved from Virginia to Washington. He comes in and he's talking about the guns that he needed some stuff for. I'm like, you can't bring those into the state of Washington.
No, you can't.
You're importing them.
He may have to end up being under arrest. That's Dan Mitchell from Sporting Systems. You've got the Lars Larson Show.